Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm the GM, your host, and in this one, we're going to be talking about The Invasion, which was a fairly major event that DC put out in 1988 and 1989. And it's this war that breaks out between Earth and like multiple other planets. And it was kind of, how do I want to put this? Like DC had at this point done the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that was obviously a huge deal. It was this kind of like a big spectacle, right? And so DC was sort of cluing into the fact that stuff like that, and for instance, over at Marvel, they had done Secret Wars. They were getting ready to do the Infinity Gauntlet, these bigger than life stories were becoming a thing, you know what I mean? And so that's what this was supposed to be. And a lot of really major things actually did happen during this. Like it's, the Cold War is still going on, and they decided to just cripple the USSR in this story. Like Moscow is completely destroyed. I'm getting into spoiler territory. I should not spoil too much. The reason I was talking so much at the beginning of this video is I feel like there's a lot of people who would hear what I was doing and maybe not quite realize the ramifications and maybe not want to stick with it. You know what I mean? So I wanted to try to capture everybody's attention a little more and say, hey, I really feel like this one is a good one. And then not only that, for us on a more personal level, this was the passing of the torch from one of our earliest game masters to which was Greg Sheets, by the way, credit where credit is due. Greg did a tremendous amount of the legwork in the beginning, kind of getting this game off the ground. So I want to make sure I give him credit. And then he passed the torch to Jay Mora. And Jay was my best friend in high school. And basically, right after Greg ran this, Jay had to move. His mom and dad split up, and so she moved into a smaller house that happened to be in my school district then. Um, and so yeah, Jay started to run the game for a completely different group of people. You know what I mean? And I got to be careful how I word this because like what Greg did was good. I'm not trying to say anything bad about Greg at all. I just want to say good things about Jay. I always felt like Jay was in our way, kind of like our version of Jack Kirby, where he just came up with these ideas, and like a lot of Jay's contributions to the game were some of the best stuff we ever had. And like I've been the GM the longest, but I don't think I'm the best GM. I think Jay was probably the best GM. You know what I mean? Um, where like for instance, for the 4 years that we were in high school, he just was making like memorable, iconic character after iconic character. He was just kind of knocking it out of the park. Um, so yeah, that's kind of cool because the way it worked was Greg ran this in the town where Greg lived, and then Jay reran the same game in the town that I lived in. Oh, I mean, not a town. I lived in the country, but there was a little village about a mile north of my house, and that's where Jay's house was. We lived about a mile apart. Um, and I'm sure there's some people who are going to be kind of confused about like, well, what do you mean you ran the same game twice? Think of it this way, because I've had some other comments kind of along these lines, some other questions. So think of it like this. I feel like we're all probably pretty familiar with Back to the Future, right? So in the first movie, Marty McFly is in 1955 doing certain things, right? Like at one point he's on a stage playing a guitar, right? That part, that's kind of like what Greg ran. You know what I mean? And so then when Jay moved to my school district and was running the game there for a whole new group of players. And by the way, this hits also around the same time as the first Michael Keaton Batman movie. So a lot of people who would never paid any attention to comic book stuff before saw us playing this game at the lunch table every day, and all of a sudden they wanted to get into role playing. So I mean that's worth mentioning too. But what Jay did, I would compare it to the part in Back to the Future 2, where once again Marty is in 1955, but now he's wearing like a black leather jacket. And so while there's a younger Marty on the stage playing a guitar, there's an older Marty doing stuff like dropping sandbags behind the scenes and stuff like that, right? So the characters that we were playing at my school, we were kind of the guys dropping sandbags, if that makes sense. And what Greg ran was more um where the focus was, the obvious events happening. Does that make sense? So when Jay reran it, he was kind of filling in little gaps and he was adding details and stuff like that that weren't there before. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, as always, just say something in the comments section and I'll try to do a better job of getting the idea across. At any rate, before we get into the story itself, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. We've got an awesome community here, and that's because of you. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here. There's a million other things you could be doing, and you're listening to me instead. So I appreciate you. Thank you guys. Okay, that said, let's dive in. A prologue to this one takes place in space in the late 1980s, where we see two alien races working together. A Hulk like alien with pink skin called a Kund is serving as a guard slash enforcer for a group of bald aliens with huge heads and mouths full of long needle like teeth. These aliens are called Dominators and they are scientists. They abduct a bunch of random human beings from Earth. They have had dealings with Earth in the past, and their every plan has been thwarted by superheroes. So the Dominators are studying humans to see what causes some to develop powers. And in today's experiment, they're going to fire blasters at people and see if some sort of latent superhuman gene kicks in to save them. The Dominators predict one human will survive. The experiment begins and it's gruesome, but to their dismay, 6 human beings survive. Amos Monroe, who is a con man from New Orleans, Carlotta Rivera, who is a supermodel from Spain, Dexter Fairfax, who is an author of children's books from England, Fritz Klein, a ski instructor from Austria, Moshe Levy, a little kid from Israel, and last but not least, Snapper Carr, former mascot of the Justice League. So the humans are studied, and in the end, the scientists conducting the experiments appear before a huge gathering of dominators to give a report. They suggest that Earth is actually the most dangerous planet in the universe, and they think of superhuman characters kind of like a disease. A superpowered being can have children with a non superpowered being, and more often than not, the children are going to have powers too. So if this keeps up, after enough time has passed, all the people on Earth are going to have powers, and not just like one kind of power. If a man with super speed marries a woman with fire powers, their kids are probably going to have fire and super speed powers. And if that kid grows up and marries someone with lightning and teleportation, then in the third generation, there's a chance that the grandchildren could have fire, lightning, super speed, and teleportation. So the Dominators fear a future where everyone on Earth has omnipower, and the Kuns fear that too, and they're working alongside of them. Also, on the planet Thanagar, the home of the Hawkmen, a bloody civil war has just taken place, and a new leader named Drawl has assumed command. He's gathering up those who oppose him, removing their wings, and handing them over to the Dominators for experimentation as part of what he refers to as the purification process. And then there is the planet Daxam, which was settled by colonists from Krypton so long ago that the Daxamites have forgotten their own origins. The Dominators approach the Daxamites asking them to help, and the Daxamites say they are curious about humanity's metahuman genetics, but they don't want war. The Dominators don't care that Daxam won't fight. What they were really after was some essential medical technology that only the Daxamites have, and they give it to the Dominators. The Dominators even speak to the forces of Apocalypse. Darkseid, before he passed away, believed the key to the anti life equation was on Earth. And in the case he was correct, Apocalypse wants the equation before Earth is destroyed. More time passes, and more races join the Alien Alliance. Citadel, Durla, Gildishpan, Okara, and Scion, and they begin planning for war. A Green Lantern named John Redbridge was sent to help a group of rebels in the Vega system years ago. He met and fell in love with a feline woman named Felicity, and by the late 1980s, they're married with a couple of kids. While speaking with the Omega Men, the Green Lantern's power ring alerts him to a huge mass of biological material that is moving through space. And it turns out to be a Durlan bioship. It crashes into the Omega Men's ship, and the Durlan shapeshifters do their best impression of John Carpenter's The Thing. Unfortunately for the Green Lantern, this surprise attack hit him just as the 24-hour charge on his power ring was up. So he loses his powers at the worst possible time. He, his family, and the other Omega Men are captured by something resembling tentacles that end in mouths. They're handed over to the Alien Alliance and placed in the brig of a starship for study. The many diverse armadas of these various alien races assemble and travel to Earth, where an automated message from a NASA satellite welcomes them. Then the aliens invade Australia, landing tons and tons of starships in the outback. The Martian Manhunter wants to assemble the many members of the Justice League, but Maxwell Lord tells Jean to wait on the United Nations to approve it. So right now, the Justice League waits. From their new base in Australia, the Dominators broadcast a message to Earth demanding that humanity hands over all of their superheroes. The UN discusses it. Some want to sacrifice the few for the good of the many, while others say the heroes are the world's strongest defense against an invading army. So it's put to a vote, and Earth decides to side with its heroes. Which brings us to the main plot of today's adventure. Earth has been invaded. Australia has fallen, and in the ruins of what used to be Melbourne, the alien armada now has a base of operations. It is from there that they begin a multi-pronged attack. The warlords of Okarna attack the USSR and China. The Gildishpan attack the Arctic Circle. The Kund attack the South Pacific. The Durlans attack Cuba. and a hawk ship from Thanagar appears in the skies over California. A scientist named Gordon Reed works for a company akin to Lockheed Martin, making equipment for the United States military. Reed's newest invention is specialized holographic armor with defensive and offensive weaponry, or shadow for short. Despite, excuse me, desperate times call for desperate measures, so Gordon Reed puts on the glossy black armor himself and leaves the skyscraper where he built it. And he attacks one of the engines of a Thanagarian warship, destroying it. So the starship crash lands in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, killing most of the Thanagarians inside. More Thanagarians show up, and Gordon Reed is aided by heroes like the Adapter, aka Greg Sheets, Ironclad, aka Sean Cabell, Ronan, aka Dirk Dudikoff, and Spirit Knight, aka Jink Reapel. A second hawk ship arrives, and it too gets shot down, this time over Alcatraz. Meanwhile, to the south in San Diego, Animal Man fights those Thanagarians off, while to the north in Oregon, it's the Autobots who lend a hand. Around the world, enlistment numbers are the highest they've ever been. G.I. Joe, who at this point has won the fight against Cobra, is called on to not only fight the good fight, but also to train many of these new soldiers. The war starts in 1988 and it's still going in 1989. So Superman meets with the leaders of the Alien Alliance and a ceasefire begins. The aliens think Earth needs 24 hours to gather the heroes together so they can be turned over. The military puts Captain Atom in charge of Earth's superheroes due to his extreme loyalty. He calls a meeting of the world's superheroes and asks them what they know so far. So Superman tells him what he saw on the alien ship. A new Supergirl is here, and she is not Kara Zor-El. This Supergirl was created in a lab, and in her true form, she is made of a pink-colored goo called a protoplasmic matrix. So many people are referring to her as the Matrix Supergirl. She asks why Earth hasn't just nuked the starships. Amanda Waller says it's possible the aliens have some sort of unseen weapon they haven't used yet. And her superiors are afraid that if Earth uses nukes, the aliens will use something even bigger that we haven't seen. Firestorm comments on how much he dislikes what seems to be a never-ending ground war. Captain Atom says there's an even bigger fleet on the dark side of the moon waiting to strike, possibly after the superheroes are handed over. He says the heroes have been on the defensive for far too long, and it's time to go on the offensive. Guy Gardner enthusiastically says, "All right." Batman says there are plenty of superheroes who don't have powers. They'd be ill suited to the current plan. So Amanda Waller says that's why they're going to fill in the gaps by recruiting supervillains. On the Dominator mothership, some Dominators from a lower social caste report in. The high caste Dominator commander asks for details, and the underlings say phase 2 is ready to begin. The commander says as soon as they've destroyed Earth, they will wipe out their allies as well. Meanwhile, Superman leads the attack on the alien ships, and the Daxamites, who have Kryptonian powers under Earth's yellow sun, attack. They outnumber and defeat the Man of Steel. Superman asks why they're attacking him if they're from Daxam, and they say that they are observers. And when he attacked the Kund ship, they had to defend themselves. Meanwhile, in the Arctic Circle, Atlantean forces led by Aquaman attack the Gil-Dishpan aliens who have set up underwater bases, and the heroes there win. Elsewhere, a group of Dominators have the Flash on an operating table. They captured him in a recent battle and mention how odd it is that he didn't use his super speed. They decide to dissect him to figure out why. And what they find implanted inside of his torso is a bomb with the LexCorp logo on it. It explodes big time, taking out an entire ship. At LexCorp Tower in Metropolis, Lex Luthor Jr. watches via a remote camera. He calls Amanda Waller, who recruited him, and tells her how it went. She thanks him for his assistance and assures him that LexCorp will be getting more military contracts in the near future if Earth survives this war. Lex Luthor thinks about Superman and wonders if he will survive the war. Meanwhile, Superman is awake again, and for some reason, the Daxamites are starting to get sick. Something in Earth's atmosphere is affecting them in a way that does not affect Superman. So Superman suggests they leave Earth, which brings us to the epilogue of today's adventure, which takes place in outer space. It's out there that a lone Dominator discovers the secret of the metagene, something deep within the human body that responds to danger and can sometimes cause superpowers to manifest if the person experiences significant physical and emotional stress. And now that he has learned how it is activated, he knows how to deactivate it. Using this knowledge, he invents a gene bomb. And soon, all of the world's superheroes are going to be affected by it. And then Earth will be destroyed, and the Dominators are going to rule the universe. And that's the end of part one. We enjoyed playing this one. We hope you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, as always, we'd love it if you took a moment of your time to smash like, hit subscribe, and leave us a comment. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.